Maybe you think you've already forgiven. You no longer mention their name. You don't cry over the past anymore. You don't want to see them again. And you tell yourself, I'm fine. But there's something you haven't noticed. Every time you accidentally hear an old song, every time someone brings up their name, every time you walk down a familiar street, something in your chest tightens, just a little. But it's real. Maybe it's a short breath, a nameless silence, a sadness without tears. And once again, you turn away, just like always. I don't know what you've been through. I don't know who betrayed you. I don't know who walked away without a word. I don't know how long that wound has lived inside you. But I do know this. Some people are unforgettable, not because they mattered, but because we once placed our heart in their hands, and they crushed it without even knowing. You kept living. You kept working. You kept smiling. But a part of you still hasn't let go. Have you ever thought about this? That forgiveness isn't a feeling. It's a decision made over and over until the wound truly heals. Stoicism doesn't teach you to be cold. It doesn't say, just ignore it. It teaches something deeper, that what you refuse to face will continue to control you in another form. A person who carries anger inside can never be truly free. Even if they say, I'm fine, their body still flinches when the memory comes back. Even if they say, I've moved on, their subconscious still reenacts the same old scene every night. And the scariest part is this: the pain doesn't disappear. It just changes form. It hides in your fatigue with no cause. It disguises itself as anger toward innocent people. It wears the mask of, I'm fine, but it's quietly eating you alive. Does this feel familiar? You were betrayed once, and now you can't trust anyone. You were abandoned, and now you're always the one to walk away first, just to avoid being hurt again. You were humiliated, and now you wear emotional armor ready to strike anyone who gets too close. But all of that isn't the real you. It's the you after the wound, a version shaped by memory, not by freedom. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, when you feel anger towards someone, ask yourself, what part of me is being threatened? And in many cases, what's threatened isn't logic. It's your ego, your pride, your unhealed pain. You don't need to pretend to be strong. You don't need anyone to tell you. Just forgive. Just let it go. You only need to do one thing. Be honest with yourself. Try sitting with this one question as honestly as you can. If today were your last day alive, would you really want to carry this anger to the grave? Maybe you'll hesitate. Maybe you're not ready to let go. That's okay. Stoicism doesn't force you to forgive immediately. It only whispers one thing. If you're still holding on to it, it's also holding on to you. You want freedom, but you're chained by what you think is justice. You tell yourself you can't forgive because they don't deserve it. But forgiveness, in truth, has nothing to do with them. Forgiveness is the act of someone strong enough to no longer carry resentment as a weapon because you don't need it to survive. You don't need the past to prove you were once hurt. You don't need to carry shattered glass just to remind yourself not to trust again. You need something else. You need to feel light again. You need to be yourself without being distorted by what someone else did wrong. And maybe that journey starts with a very small question. Have I truly forgiven? Not from your lips, but from your heart, from your body, from the way you breathe each morning. If you can't answer that question yet, then this video is for you. Not to judge, not to condemn, but to help you reflect on one simple truth. That maybe what's been holding you back all this time isn't another person, isn't even the past. It's you still not ready to let go. There's a common misconception about forgiveness, and I'm sure you've either heard it or said it to someone yourself. Just forget it. so your heart can be at peace. But the truth is, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it certainly doesn't mean denying the pain. In Stoic philosophy, there's no room for avoidance. Stoicism doesn't teach us to forget. It teaches us to see clearly and still stand, not to bypass the pain, but to walk through it with awareness. So why do so many people believe that to forgive, you must forget? Because they're afraid. Afraid to face what happened, afraid to look back at wounds that never fully healed, afraid to see themselves as weak, vulnerable, or still angry. But you know what? Real forgiveness doesn't begin with forgetting. It begins with realizing that you still remember and having the courage to admit it. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to act like you've grown up and don't care anymore. Because some wounds don't vanish just because time has passed. Some words still echo 10 years later. And if someone uses the same tone, your chest still tightens. That's the truth. And Stoicism never asks you to deny the truth. The starting point of Stoic wisdom is this: accept reality as it truly is. Nothing more, nothing less. Don't glorify the pain, but don't numb it with empty phrases either. You have the right to feel pain. You have the right to admit you've been hurt. And you have the right not to forgive if you're not ready. But you also need to understand one thing. When you keep holding on to that bitterness, you're trading your inner peace for a wound you've kept on the surface. Many believe that forgiveness means being morally superior, but it doesn't. Forgiveness means you're no longer letting that person control your inner life. See the contradiction here. You're angry at someone. You swear you'll never forgive them, but every time they show up in your mind, your heart races. You get tense. You feel uneasy, which means, even though you hate them, even though you never speak to them, they're still controlling your emotions. So in the end, who's really winning? Stoicism calls this loss of inner freedom, and it's a subtle kind of slavery. No chains, no bars. Yet your mind no longer belongs to you. You may be successful. You may be respected. You may stand strong in the outside world. But if just one name, one face, or one memory can keep you up at night, you're still being controlled. Not by them, but by emotions you haven't faced. A true Stoic doesn't let anger take over their mind, not because they never feel angry, but because they know every minute spent in anger is a minute of power you've handed to someone else, and that is never worth the trade. There's another truth we need to face. Forgiveness does not mean agreeing with what happened. You don't have to say that betrayal was okay. You don't have to pretend that the lies were meant to be. You don't have to come up with excuses for someone else's wrong. You can forgive and still stand firm in knowing what happened was wrong. Stoicism never asks you to call wrong right. It simply asks you to give others back responsibility for their actions and keep for yourself responsibility over your reactions. Because that is the one thing you always control. You can't control who hurt you, but you can choose whether they keep hurting you inside your mind. Someone once asked Epictetus, "If someone hurts me, is it their fault?" He replied, "You are hurt, not by their actions, but by how you choose to interpret those actions in your own mind." That might be hard to accept, but if you truly want your soul to be free, you have to begin by no longer letting the past define your present. No one can change what happened, but you can change the role the past plays in your life now. Is it a wound, or a lesson, a reason to keep hating, or an invitation to rise beyond yourself? You choose, and that choice is yours alone. You might be thinking, "I haven't forgiven them because they haven't shown any remorse. I can't let go because they never acknowledged how much they hurt me." I understand, and you're allowed to feel that way. But ask yourself this instead: what if they never regret it? What if they never understand the pain they caused? How long will you keep yourself locked in that prison? How many more years will you wait for something that may never come? Stoicism teaches this. The more you expect others to change, the more you give up your own power. Forgiveness is something you do for yourself, not because they deserve it, not because they apologized, not because they understood, but because you want to stop living in the place where the pain began. If you're still holding on to resentment, I'm not telling you to forgive right now. I'm just inviting you to pause and ask, is what you're holding on to holding you back? Is it helping you live better? Or is it slowly draining the peace you once had? You can't carry rage in your heart and still pray for peace. You can't cling to the past and expect to move forward at the same time. Maybe it's time to choose, not to forget, but to stop letting what happened keep piercing your heart like a blade. If you've made it this far, there's a quiet part of you deep inside that wants to be free. Not because you're weak, but because you're finally ready to breathe again. In the next part, I'll tell you a true story about someone who thought they had forgiven, only to realize they never truly let go. If it feels right, I invite you to walk with me into part 3. There was a man, let's call him Michael. Michael was calm by nature. He worked in law, a field that demanded fairness, logic, and composure. In his 40s, he had a stable life, a kind wife, good kids, a peaceful home. From the outside, people would say, this is a man who's overcome his past. But inside, Michael, there was a room that had never been opened, and inside that room was the image of a father who had walked out when he was 7. Michael's father was a smart man but quick-tempered. That year, after a loud fight with his wife, he packed his bags and left, leaving behind a woman and a small child, standing alone in the doorway. On a grey, rainy afternoon, Michael didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just stood there and etched that moment into memory like a burn mark. From that day on, he never spoke of his father again, never asked his mother about him, never looked at middle-aged men without feeling discomfort. He thought it would pass. He told himself, some people aren't worth remembering, and he quietly believed, I've forgiven him. I don't hold anything against him. Until one night, Michael attended a group therapy session because his wife asked him to. Just try it once, she said. He didn't want to, but he went. For her, for their kids, for the times he snapped over small things and didn't know why. And there, in that room, seated in a circle of 12 strangers, Michael sat and listened to the stories of people who'd been wounded. No one was forced to speak. But then, a man began to share about the father who walked out when he was 8. Every word he said pierced Michael's chest. And when the man broke down and cried, Michael couldn't hold back either. For the first time in over 30 years, Michael cried for his father, not out of longing, not out of hatred, but because he realized he had never actually forgiven. He had just frozen his emotions. That night, Michael walked home. The air was cold. The streets were empty. He looked up at the sky and asked himself, how can someone live a whole life and not realize they're still in chains? He had never thought of his father when making decisions, but now he saw it clearly. Every need to control, every obsession with being right, every sudden burst of anger, they were all echoes from a boy who was never comforted. Not everyone who leaves you comes back to say sorry, but that doesn't mean the wound heals on its own. From that night on, Michael started writing letters to his father. He didn't send them. He just wrote, every night, a small piece. Sometimes, he wrote in anger, I used to wish you were dead. I believed I'd become better than you. I never let my kids call anyone grandpa. Sometimes, he wrote in loneliness, I just wanted to ask you one thing. Why? I used to want you to see me succeed without you. But deep down, there's still a little boy who just wanted a hug. Through each unsent letter, he peeled away the layers of emotion he had buried, not to forgive instantly, but to understand himself, because to truly forgive, you have to know what you're angry about. Angry because you were abandoned, because you were made to feel small, because, all these years, no one ever acknowledged your pain. Michael realized something terrifying. He had lived his whole life trying not to be like his father, and in doing so, he never allowed himself to be wrong, never allowed himself to be weak, never allowed himself to need anyone, and that made him cold to his own wife and children. Forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it does change where the future is headed. A month later, Michael found his father's phone number. The man was still alive, still living in a small coastal town, still alone. Michael didn't call right away. He saved the number and let it sit, as if he needed time to ask himself, do I want to call because I need him to apologize, or because I'm finally ready not to need the apology anymore? Real forgiveness is when you no longer need the other person to change. You don't need them to say, I'm sorry. You don't need them to understand your pain. You don't need them to pay for it. You only need one thing: to stop carrying their image in your mind, to stop letting their shadow show up in your behavior, to stop letting the wound they caused keep bleeding into every new relationship you build. Michael finally made the call. The voice on the other end was old, weak, confused. He didn't even recognize the voice of his own son. The conversation wasn't long. There were no grand apologies, no tears, no dramatic reconciliation. It was just a call. But when Michael hung up, he felt light, not quite happy, but deeply relieved, as if, for the first time in decades, he'd had the chains taken off his wrists. You don't have to call the one who hurt you. You don't have to face them in person, but you do have to face yourself inside. You need to ask, am I still living to get back at something that already passed? Have I used resentment as my backbone to stay strong? Am I making someone in my present pay for the wounds of someone in my past? If the answer is yes, then maybe you haven't truly forgiven. Forgiveness is not something you do for the past. It's something you do for the present, for the person you live with now, for the child within you who grew up scared, for the you of today who deserves a life that isn't burdened by someone who's long gone. If a name just popped into your mind, someone you thought you had forgotten, a memory you thought you had let go of, then maybe you're standing at the edge of a quiet kind of freedom. No drama needed, no rush to forgive, just the courage to look back and begin to set it down. In the next part, we'll explore why unforgiveness is a kind of self-imprisonment, and why the longer you hold on, the more you become your own victim. If you're still here, I believe there's something deep within you ready to be healed. There's something very unique about Stoic philosophy. It never treats negative emotions as enemies, but as messages. From the Stoic perspective, emotions are maps pointing toward the areas in our inner life where we've become misaligned. They don't need to be erased. They don't need to be denied. They just need to be read correctly. When you feel anger towards someone, it means you feel disrespected. When you find it hard to forgive, it means you feel like a part of your self-worth has been stolen. And at a deeper level, those emotions are whispering, I can't let this go, because if I do, I'll look weak, I'll look stupid, I'll be vulnerable again. See it now. We don't hold on to resentment to hurt the other person. We hold on to it to protect our ego. But that's the trap. Because the moment you say, I need this wound to protect myself, you've begun clinging to the very thing that's hurting you. Have you ever held a burning coal in your hand and hoped someone else would get burned? Stoicism doesn't deny that some actions are wrong. It doesn't ask you to be friends with those who've harmed you. But it does ask a core question. If it's already happened and you can't change it, how much longer will you suffer because of it? How much of your life are you willing to surrender for something that's already over? From the Stoic lens, forgiveness isn't about being soft. It's not an emotion. It's a decision, a rational act, a sovereign choice. I choose to lay this down, not because they deserve it, but because I refuse to give any more of my life to something that has ended. You might say, but I can't control my emotions. I still feel the pain. And that's completely valid. Stoicism never asks you to not feel. It only asks that you stop letting your emotions control your behavior. If you feel angry, acknowledge it. If you feel hurt, face it. But don't let those emotions dictate how you live. There's something profound in how Marcus Aurelius viewed forgiveness in Meditations. He wrote, "When someone does wrong, they've already been punished, for their behavior reveals their ignorance, their weakness, their blindness. We need not punish them again in our minds." Do you understand what he meant? Marcus didn't see other people's mistakes as sins to be hated. He saw them as signs of lack, a lack of clarity, wisdom, or wholeness. The one who hurt you, maybe they were hurt before. Maybe they never learned how to love properly. Maybe they're still driven by fear, hatred, or shame. That doesn't mean you have to sympathize. It doesn't mean you have to excuse them. It just means this: you no longer see them as someone who holds power over your peace. You return them to their proper place. A flawed human being, nothing more, nothing less. Now come back to yourself. Ask honestly, what am I living for? Do I want to keep the doors of my heart shut, just to protect this one piece of anger? Everyone has their limits. You can carry resentment for a year, 5 years, 10, but one day, it won't just sit quietly. It will begin to take new shapes, into stress, into vague anxiety, into sleepless nights, into random bursts of rage toward those you love, into a cold stare, even when all you want is to hold someone close. And the most tragic part, you start losing yourself. You no longer know who you are without the resentment to cling to. You no longer know what you live for except the obsession with restoring a lost sense of justice. That's a kind of self-imprisonment. You lock yourself into the role of a victim so no one can hurt you again. But in doing so, you also block your chance at happiness. Stoicism offers you a key. It doesn't open the world outside. It opens something inside. That door doesn't lead to forgiveness as a gift to others. It leads to freedom for you. Remember Michael, the man from the earlier story? He didn't need an apology. He didn't need revenge. He didn't need healing from the other person. He just needed not to be bound anymore by someone's absence. And you can do that too. If you've ever asked, how far have I carried this pain? How many layers of protection have I built around a single memory? How many people in my present have suffered because of a wound from my past? Then maybe it's time to stop, not to forget, but to choose a new direction, not to let someone win or lose, but so you don't have to keep fighting anymore. Because peace doesn't come from winning an emotional war. It comes from no longer wanting to fight. In the next part, I'll summarize the core message and bring you back to one essential question. Are you truly living, or just being dragged by something that's already over? If you've made it this far, I don't think you're here for theory. I think you're here for something else. A kind of quiet letting go, one that's grounded and real. You've walked a long road with me, from the moments when you thought, I'm fine now, to the quiet realizations there are things you no longer talk about, but are still living with every single day, not as memories, but as a stone sitting deep in your chest. And if you're still here, still listening, then maybe you're beginning to see this truth. Forgiveness isn't a feeling. It's the act of someone who wants to be free. You don't have to be strong to forgive. You just have to be honest. Honest with yourself. That you were hurt. That you were left behind. That you weren't protected. That you waited for an apology that never came. And then you choose to wait no longer. Not because you're noble, not because you want to be the bigger person, but because you simply cannot keep living every day, carrying a weight someone else created. Maybe you once told yourself, I don't need them anymore. I'm over it. But the truth is, we only feel the need to say, I'm over it, when we're not. You thought, I've forgiven them. I'm not angry. But if one day, when the seasons change, you suddenly see someone with eyes like theirs, and your chest tightens. If every time you hear of betrayal, you flinch like it just happened to you. If someone brings up that old story, and you smile politely, but lie awake that night, staring at the ceiling, then maybe you haven't forgiven. You've just folded that page and pushed it into the bottom drawer of your emotions. Stoicism doesn't ask you to open that drawer every day, but it does invite you to stop living as if it doesn't exist. Because what we bury doesn't disappear. It just shifts shape, changes form, speaks in new languages, and continues to act from the shadows. Maybe it's showing up in the way you cut people off, because you never want to be disrespected again. Maybe it's in the way you distrust everyone, because someone vanished on you without warning. Maybe it lives in your inability to fully feel joy, because deep down, you still believe, I don't deserve to be that happy. None of those things are who you truly are. They're just the effects of what was never released. So the question is, what are you waiting for? An apology, a change from the one who hurt you, a ripe moment when you'll magically feel at peace. I'm not asking to rush you. I'm simply asking, what if that apology never comes? What if no one ever says they were wrong? What if that moment never arrives? How long will you live suspended between now and a then that never returns? Stoicism teaches one very simple truth. Never let what's outside your control rule your inner world. Other people, not your domain. How they treated you, not your choice, but your response, your interpretation, your energy, today, that's yours. And you don't have to forgive all at once. You can forgive in pieces. Every time you remember, and don't react the same way as before. That's a step in forgiveness. Every time you face a similar situation, and don't project your past pain onto it. That's a step in forgiveness. Every time you take a deep breath, and don't tense up the way you used to. That too is forgiveness. Forgiveness is a process, quiet, unflashy, often invisible to others. You don't need to announce it. You just need to know, today, I feel lighter than yesterday. And tomorrow, I hope to feel lighter still. If you still feel anger towards someone, that's okay. If your chest still aches when old wounds are triggered, that's okay. If you haven't been able to let go, that's okay. Stoicism never demands instant healing. It simply asks you to be awake and to keep choosing to move forward, not for anyone else, but because you deserve a life that isn't held hostage by what's already gone. You've carried this long enough. Maybe it's time to put it down. No ritual, no audience, just a quiet knowing inside. I don't want to live the rest of my life carrying something that no longer exists. You don't forgive because they deserve it. You forgive because you deserve peace. You don't have to erase the memory. You just have to break the chain that connects it to the feeling of being stuck. You don't need to do anything grand. Just begin with a small decision, with a single breath, with a whisper deep inside. I've walked far enough with this pain. It's time to go home. In the next section, we'll walk into the light. where Stoicism opens the door to something deeper. How can we live with the past without being ruled by it? How do we forgive without erasing boundaries? How can kindness remain strong without hardening into stone? If you're still here, then I invite you to keep walking with me. There's one thing Stoicism always emphasizes: outward actions only hold true value when they arise from an awakened mind. A person who is quiet is not always calm. A person who forgives is not always understanding. And someone who chooses to let go may not be weak. On the outside, you might appear composed, but if inside, you're still screaming, that isn't freedom. It's just suppression, unresolved. Stoicism doesn't care much about how you look. It cares about the true state of your inner world. When you say you've forgiven, Stoicism asks, did you forgive because you saw the truth clearly, or because you didn't want to lose your image as the good person? When you stay silent, Stoicism asks, are you silent because the argument no longer matters, or because you're afraid to face the truth in your heart? Forgiveness, if born from avoidance, won't heal. It only buries. Letting go, if born from helplessness, won't set you free. It only creates a reluctant version of yourself, one who survives without daring to feel. That's why Stoicism teaches every action, if not accompanied by wisdom, becomes performance. Have you ever forgiven someone just because you hate conflict, just to avoid the headache, just because you didn't want to seem bitter? If yes, then face that. Not to blame yourself, but to realize that wasn't forgiveness. That was escape. Forgiveness in Stoicism is bounded by clarity. You don't forgive because someone deserves it. You forgive because you refuse to let pain dictate your behavior. But this is important. Forgiveness does not mean continued permission. Someone hurt you. You forgive, but you still have the right not to let them back in. You can say, I forgive you, but I won't walk with you anymore. I don't hate you, but I need to protect my space. I don't wish you harm, but I won't wait for you to change. Forgiveness is an act of intelligence, not naivety. Stoicism calls this compassion with boundaries. Why do we need boundaries? Because kindness, without lines, becomes a bottomless well. People will draw, they will take, they will leave, never knowing to say thanks. And you, if you keep forgiving without redrawing the lines, you'll lose yourself, not in rage, but in quiet erosion. Compassion is not softness. It's a strength rooted in awareness. I can understand another's pain, but I won't let them hurt me forever, and I won't keep hurting myself because of them. Stoicism doesn't use reason to suppress emotion. It uses reason to place emotions where they belong. Anger, acknowledge it. Sadness, acknowledge it. Forgiveness, do it so your heart can breathe lighter. But if they repeat the same harm, you have the right to walk away. Marcus Aurelius wrote, a person can hurt you only if you let them. They succeed in hurting you only when you overvalue them and forget you have the power to step back. See, forgiveness isn't giving away power. Forgiveness is taking your inner authority back. When you choose not to hold a grudge, you are not weak. You are choosing not to keep bleeding for something that has already passed. When you choose not to seek revenge, you are not cowardly. You are conserving energy for what actually matters. Forgiveness is not the mark of someone meek. It is the mark of someone strong enough to no longer carry weapons in their voice, their gaze, or their walk. You don't have to prove you're fine by acting cold. You don't have to prove you're strong by refusing to feel. You just need to know what you're choosing and why. If you're still carrying resentment, shine a light on it with reason. Ask it, are you really helping me live better? Are you helping me understand life deeper, or just making me close off? Peace by peace. If the answer is, I'm only locking you inside, then thank it and set it down. You weren't born to be someone who holds lifelong grudges. You weren't born to repay emotional debts for the rest of your life. You were born to live, to understand, to move forward, and if possible, to open your heart again this time, with awareness walking beside you. In the final part, we'll arrive at one key question, a space calm enough to breathe, where you can choose, just once, for yourself. Do I want to carry this into the rest of my life? Or is it time to lay it down and walk away? Lighter. If you've come this far, this journey is no longer theory. It has become a homecoming. You've just walked through nearly 60 minutes, not to learn something new, not to hear some lofty philosophy, not to have someone tell you the right way to forgive. If you're still here, maybe it's because you're tired. Tired of pretending you're okay. Tired of telling yourself, that's in the past. Tired of carrying something no one sees yet feels heavy every day. If that's true, I don't need you to do anything. I just want to say one thing. You don't have to forgive today. You just need to be honest that you're not ready yet. You don't have to force yourself to let go. You just need to pause and ask, what exactly am I still holding? And is it holding me back in return? You don't need to erase anyone from memory. You just need to untie the tangled emotion that's still binding you to that figure. You don't need an apology. You don't need anyone to come back. You don't need anyone to admit they were wrong. You just need to choose how you want to live from today forward. Maybe you don't know where to begin. So start with the smallest thing. One deep breath. One gentle look toward yourself. One quiet sentence in your heart. I don't need to carry this anymore. No loud declarations, no grand announcements. Just a small release from within. You've lived long enough with that wound. Maybe today is the day to stop. Not because you've forgotten, not because you've lost, but because you've understood. No one deserves to keep you living in defense. No one is worth you draining all your kindness just to become cold. And no one should have the power to live in your mind rent-free long after they've walked away. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Don't let the memory of someone who's left become the reason you can't live fully in the present." Stoicism doesn't promise you'll forget. It just shows you how to remember without pain, how to hold the memory like an old book. Not something you reread every day, not something that haunts every line, just something you shelve, gently, no longer stealing tonight's sleep, no longer shaping tomorrow's love. You might not believe in miracles. That's okay. Stoicism doesn't believe in luck either, only in attitude. And sometimes, the most profound act is simply someone who chooses to live without hatred. Not because they'll gain something, but because they no longer want to lose themselves. You've walked a long path with me, from that feeling of unease, to daring to revisit what you thought you'd let go, from someone else's story, to staring into the quiet corners of your own. Maybe you haven't fully forgiven. Maybe it still feels heavy. That's okay. What matters is, you've started to look, and for some journeys, just stopping to look means you've already started walking. Before we end, I want you to hold on to one thing. Forgiveness doesn't make you weaker. It brings you back to the whole version of yourself. Not twisted by resentment, not stained by memory, not deformed by the past. You don't need anyone to recognize your forgiveness. You just need to sleep a little better, smile a little softer, breathe a little deeper, and live one more day without biting your tongue over something long gone. If you can do that, that's forgiveness. No names to record, no debts to repay. Just a little more lightness in how you walk through life. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you, not for giving me your time, but for giving that time to yourself, to come home, to bring light in, to release, not for anyone else. but because you deserve a life free from emotional chains. If you need a sentence to help you start, try whispering something like this: I forgive not because they need it, but because I want to live freer starting today. If something in this video touched you, leave a small promise in the comments. No need to write a lot. Just be real. Maybe just 3 words. I release now. Or, I choose peace. Not for me, for you, for your path starting here. I don't know who hurt you. I don't know what in your past made you shut your heart. But I believe, if you were strong enough to carry it for all these years, you're also strong enough to put it down when the time comes. And if life allows, we'll meet again in another video, where we'll continue the journey inward, back to ourselves, back to stillness, back to a clarity no longer ruled by pain. And if you're ready, that door has always been waiting for you.